Excellent. So welcome again to session 5, which is on a horizon scanning discussion. Again, my name is Ourania Kosti. I'm the Executive Director of the IAP Secretariat office in Washington, D.C., hosted by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. So I want to welcome you to this session, which as a staff member of IAP, I considered one of the very important ones of this conference. Exactly because you give us your ideas, your views, your visions about what IAP should be doing, could be doing, and how we can all partner together to work on interesting projects, interesting activities, issue interesting statements. I want to begin by noting that this is not a formal horizon scanning review. So our contributors today will talk about their ideas of potential projects and statements, but we're not here to score or judge or say this is a bigger priority than the other. Can I please ask on the side to keep it down a little bit? Thank you. I don't need a microphone. I just need, there's a lot of noise happening that way. Thank you so much. And as I said, for us, it's a very valuable opportunity to understand what our members want IAP to be doing. So for this session, we have received 5 submissions for potential projects. 3 contributors are here in person and 2 will be presenting online. And we have also received contributions from one academy, the Royal Society, for 2 potential statements, and we will hear more about that in a bit. So what we are asking each contributor to do is to spend 5 to 6 minutes and present their ideas. And we have asked them to focus on 4 key points. Why is the topic important and timely? Why is IAP the appropriate entity to take up this work? What kinds of partners or collaborators you're looking for, and maybe not added on the script, but maybe who would be interested in sponsoring this idea, and how can IAP best support and advance this idea? The fact that we have many academy members represented here is a good venue to have these discussions. Again, I would call them informal discussions. We do not expect slide presentations today, just oral remarks are sufficient. After each presentation is done, we can spend a minute or 2 on questions or clarification per presentation, and then we will open the floor for discussion with audience participation, both here in the room and online. With that, I should also say that we welcome what I call walk-ins. So all of you sitting here, if you have an idea you want to discuss, please raise your hand and let's talk about it. And I already know that Alea has indicated interest to talk about a potential project as well. So this is the space for forward-looking thinking, and we very much look forward to that. And with that said, I should give the floor. Do we have the people online or not yet? We're not set. We're working on that. Okay, excellent. If that's the case, the first 2 presenters are online. So Thomas, I will ask you to go first until we sort out the online participation. Do you have a microphone? Okay. Is it done?
Thank you, Rania, and thank you for inviting me to give this contribution. I'm Thomas Elmqvist. I'm the program director of ESAC, the European Academy of Sciences Advisory Council. I'm also a professor at Stockholm University at Stockholm Resilience Center. And my idea here was that IAP should engage deeper into the theme of this conference, bridging science and society, and particularly when it comes to bridging different knowledge systems. And the reason is, of course, that we know there is a diversity of knowledge holders outside academia, which are, I would say, extremely important, particularly in an area of transformation and turbulence as we are living in today. It's important for science building a better understanding and to address the challenges we have ahead. So what would be like a timely way of doing that? I would suggest that IAP should engage in what is coming the next year. It's the International Year of Pastoralism and Rangelands, and we're going to have a special session tomorrow going deep in. But there is an important aspect here, and that is that in these rangeland systems around the world, which cover approximately 50% of the world's territory, there are millions of people, I think 200 million people, that over millennia built up an incredibly important knowledge base and understanding of the system. But it's now challenged to climate change, to societal changes and degradation. And I think if the research community reach out to these knowledge holders and try to build new innovative ways for their livelihood, and they are stewards of some fantastic, these are the most species-rich ecosystems in the world and some of the most important for carbon storage. So this is really of global interest. So I would suggest that IAP reach out hands to other network of scientists like in IPBS, International Science Council, FAO, and also ISAC, and try to build a project around understanding where have examples where researchers have collaborated with local knowledge holder resulted in positive changes on the ground, and where have there been failures, perhaps in the absence of such collaboration. I think there are, if we do get a grasp of understanding how the academia have worked together with local and traditional knowledge holders, what have been the characteristics of successes and what have been characteristics of perhaps failures, we could learn a lot. And I think it would be really valuable if that could be done, particularly during next year, when UN declared this as the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralism, and then perhaps grab an opportunity to present at the next Convention of the Parties, COP17, of the Convention on Biological Diversity in Armenia, which is a country where 50% of its territory is rangeland, and it's I think it would be welcomed by the host country, and I think it would be really worthwhile to do this and be a good outcome of this UN International Year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Any quick questions of clarification for Thomas's remarks? Okay. How are we doing with virtual? We're on. Okay. Could I ask Haruka to present? Okay, excellent.
Okay, yes. Can you hear me?
Welcome to
Okay.
both of you. Haruka, can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
We can. No.
No?
Now we can. Perfect.
Okay, yes. Okay, so can I get started?
Yes, please. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. And then I'm sorry I'm not be able to joining in person, but I'm very pleased to present my proposal here today. So today I'm honored to present a proposal. I am representing the Young Academy of Japan. And then today I'm honored to present a proposal titled Bridging Academia and Science Diplomacy. So in the world today, where science and technology are rapidly reshaping our society, I believe it is time to connect the structure that enable science diplomacy with the value of distributive justice. So our proposal aims to bridge these two critical areas. First, about the context. So I think everyone knows that science is increasingly central to diplomatic issues such as climate change, pandemic preparedness, and then emerging technologies. However, we face two major gaps. First, these are limited structured career pathway for the researchers to meaningfully engage in the science diplomacy. And then second, there are persistent global inequalities in research outcomes. So I think we need to discuss distributive justice, how to share the benefits of innovation beyond just high-income countries. So our proposal addresses these two gaps through two main pillars. The first pillar is mapping career pathway. So we will collect and showcase existing examples of how researchers engage in diplomacy and then convene workshops for early career researchers. And the second pillar is to establishing some kind of the platform, not a physical platform, but kind of the places for many people can gather and discuss about the distributive justice. So we will bring together academia, policymakers, and then assist to identify frameworks for fair allocation of the scientific outcome. The innovation of this project lies in the connecting these two perspectives, the structures that enable engagement and the values that guide equitable outcomes. So why IAP? I think the IAP is the right entity for this. IAP provides a neutral and then credible platform to combine diverse national perspectives. And then this initiative creates natural synergies with IAP's existing work on science diplomacy. And why must we act now? Is a rapid advancement of new technologies, including AI or biotechnology, underscores the urgent need for collective ethical reflections. So we need to establish institutional mechanisms for fairness before the global disparities widen further. And then regarding our contribution, the Young Academy of Japan served as the proposer of this initiative and eager to actively contribute its realization. But at the same time, we would like to encourage all the other institutions, those who are interested in science diplomacy or distributive justice. We are happy to collaborate in the several ways. So in conclusion, our proposal will provide a shared evidence base for the science diplomacy careers and foster a truly global dialogue on fairness. It will encourage global collaboration between high-income and low and middle-income countries to continue to shape equitable innovation ecosystem. So we, Young Academy of Japan, look forward to working with IAP members, academics, and international partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Haruka. Any quick questions of clarification for Haruka? And we will engage in a general discussion when all contributors finish. Yes, please.
So thank you so much for this important topic and proposal, disruptive justice. And speaking from and coming as a scientist and a physician from conflict-affected country. So do you plan actually to engage more researchers, scientists coming from conflict-affected settings, and also who were been displaced to other countries and were looking more for opportunities to settle in and so on? So do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the questions. Of course, I'm very much looking forward for those who are conflict-affected zone areas or low-income countries, or those who are disproportionately unaffected. I mean, have a very limited access of those science technologies. So I do not target for the high-income countries alone, but we are very much looking forward. So if you I'm sorry, I missed which organization or which country you are from, but if your country or your organization that you are affiliated with, I'm happy to collaborate and make a further discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question and for the response. Let's move to the contribution by Bert Rima on alternatives to meat required for sustainable protein production. Bert? You're muted.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this particular project. So I'm an emeritus professor at Queen's University Belfast, but I also am the co-chair of the biosciences panel in ISAC. And so I'm following up from Thomas Nyström's suggestion. So the idea that I'd like to put into your mind is the following: that ISAC has come forward with a suggestion that we would like to follow up on a project that we have launched in September of this year, which is really looking at alternatives to meat. So we produced that report in September, and it dealt with products such as the plant-based meat resembling burgers, with insect proteins, with biomass fermentation of algae, fungi, or bacteria as potential protein sources, with precision fermentation of genetically altered yeast, which are used in making proteins like ovalbumin and some other proteins, as well as enzymes and vitamins. And then finally, the cultivated meat or lab-grown meat. So what we focused on that, and through comparison of life cycle assessment, the report included that really it is important for the world to start looking at some alternatives to meat, because it is quite difficult to see how we can go on as we are. So meat alternatives can have lower environmental impacts than the traditional beef production, with chicken meat production having the lowest impact of all. In Europe, and the report was very much focused on Europe. In Europe, it's estimated that about 40% of the loss of diversity can be ascribed to food production, and so essentially that is actually a very substantial amount of loss. And then, in terms of the environmental footprint, 48% of the consumption footprint is due to food production, and of which. So again, of that food production, 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions are due to beef production in Europe. So that is a substantial amount of greenhouse gas that is being generated as a result of that traditional beef production. Now, if we look at planetary health diets, that would almost require a situation where we would reduce beef consumption by 91% in Europe. And that, of course, is probably an unattainable level, but certainly it is important for us to reduce beef consumption. Other facts which are probably not well known and again, as I said, there's a very strong European context, is that 73 million tons of protein, which is a quarter of the total that is used for animal food. One quarter of that total is actually imported. And beef production is associated with a substantial fraction of the deforestation. It is sort of estimated that 90% of the deforestation that takes place in the world is due to increases in agricultural production. So the land is being taken for agriculture, and about 40% of that is actually for beef production. So it's a very substantial part of the total deforestation. There is a global estimate is that you could say, well, have we got a lot of land that could be used for other purposes? Well, globally, there's an estimated 13.2 billion hectares of unfrozen land in the world. And a lot of that, of course, is forests, cities, deserts, etc. But about 2.5 billion hectares are used for livestock production all over the world. But about 1.4 billion of these are not convertible to arable crop production. So that is a fraction that cannot really easily be changed in terms of using it to produce other forms of proteins. So the development of meat alternatives can and must therefore contribute to sustainable development of the world. Now, why is this timely? Well, the available evidence indicate that as incomes in low and middle income countries grow, a new middle class arises, and as a result of that, meat consumption will rise sharply. And essentially, this is probably an unsustainable development, and hence the environmental impact of traditional beef production is likely to rise actually rather than fall because of that simple fact. Now, it is therefore important to start studying societal drivers that can be applied to mitigate this potentially damaging development. And it is, of course, it's important to realize that there are, of course, very large cultural, economic, and social parameters, as well as consumer behavior aspects that need to be studied now in order to be able to change policy, to advise policymakers on how to avoid this type of development. Now, why IAP? Well, essentially, what I saw is that IAP at some stage reacted very positively to a climate change and health report that ESAC produced, and I would suggest that essentially, in order to look at this particular problem, we would have to come forward with a similar type of extension where all four regional networks of IAP would report on what the local drivers could be that could mitigate the undesirable increase in meat consumption. And so that is really all I have to say about this particular topic. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any quick questions for clarification? Okay. Let's move on to the next contributor, Chris Hanley from the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, who will talk about the recent effort of medical academies on climate health action.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris, and I come to you from the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, where I serve as our director of our Grand Challenge on Climate Change, Human Health, and Equity. First of all, so excited to hear all the climate and health topics that have and threads that have been shared with you all today, and we'll go ahead and build on that because it is an exciting time. It's an exciting time for me, and it's an exciting time for climate health coming off of the highs and lows that were COP30 held in Belém. And thinking about our work going forward, I want to take a quick step back and rewind us back to about 4 months ago when we were approached at the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, specifically our president, Dr. Victor Zhao, by the Brazilian Health Ministry, and they asked us what could we do to drum up support for the upcoming release of the Belém Health Action Plan, which was set to be released at COP30. And after some internal discussion and some external discussion, and then some more discussion with the president of the National Academy of Medicine at Brazil, we determined that the best path forward in the short time that we had was a quick statement of support. And I say quick, but definitely not easy. So a statement of support. And we really look to have as many academies of medicine in the world sign on to this statement of support so that it could be read at COP30. And our first stop was heading over to our friends in the IAP office, Peggy and Ourania, and talking to them about whether they thought it would be something that would be valuable and hopefully would be building off the work that has been created by you all for the last 4 or 5 years in climate health. And we're excited to get not only the green light from them that it would be impactful, but also them coming on board as very early partners for this venture. So we set to work. We got to work and we contacted as many presidents of academies of medicine across the world who would listen. In total, we virtually convened about 30 of them in September. And there was some great and some excellent things that came from this conversation. The great part was that we got all 30 to sign on to statements of support for this, for the Belém Health Action Plan, which I know many of you understand the bureaucracies of getting these academies to sign on to anything, but to have 30 of them globally come together in a matter of a month was just really encouraging. But what was really more encouraging and the exciting part was that on the call, without prompting it at all, several of the presidents stood up and said, this is something that we have to continue to work together after COP30, which was something that we had internally hoped would be the case. So it was wonderful to see. And so we decided to delineate our work and focus really in the short time on COP30, and to know that if it was successful, that we would reconvene after the meeting that we just had in November and figure out what to do next. So very happy to say that everything went well at COP. The statement of support was read before the Belém Health Action Plan was introduced at COP. We actually ended up having a virtual meeting or virtual presentation set that we hosted during the event that highlighted why climate health is something that all organizations should be working on across the world, highlighted the tenets of the Belém Health Action Plan. And then in addition to that, about a half dozen or so academy presidents shared their work on climate health. So we got kind of a nice snapshot of some of the work going on to really build support and momentum. And then we tied a nice bow on it with a publication in the Lancet to close out the weekly prop. So that's all what we've done in the past, and what brings me here today. I think what we, when we're thinking about going forward, the question right now is we don't know. We've kind of put that on the back burner and are going to come together and decide what we want to do. So what I would love to hear from you all is if you're interested in partnering with us and with the other 29 academies of medicine, 28 academies plus IAP has signed on as well, to do this work forward, but to hear not just partners from us, but how IAP itself can continue to push this work going forward and partner with us. Is what brings me here. So thank you all. And thank you all again for having me.
Thank you, Chris. And can I ask medical academies or science academies with medical divisions? Can you raise your hand so that we see how many we have here? Okay, quite a lot. I hope you are marking who is who you need to talk to over the next few days. Thank you. Any quick questions of clarification for Chris? Okay, I don't see any hands. Let's move on to our one and only Peter McGrath, who will talk about teenagers and social media. That's an internal idea of a potential project. And Peter, after we complete the proposed statements as well, I will ask you to come and moderate the Q&A and discussion.
Do my best. Okay, so as part of this presentation, as Rania laid out before, we were asked to reply to 4 questions. The first of which is, why is the topic important and timely? In case you didn't catch it, the topic is teenagers, cell phones, and social media. So I'm going to start by reading the first 2 paragraphs of a Reuters news article from April this year. The article in question was titled, Adolescence TV Drama Exposes Global Issue of Teenage Violence. Adolescence, if you didn't know, was a huge hit on Netflix. I imagine some of you have seen it. People are nodding. Okay. So the Reuters article starts, TV drama Adolescence has shocked and captivated audience around the world, providing what campaigners say is a rare opportunity to tackle the largely hidden world of online misogyny and violence. Since its release on Netflix on March the 11th, more than 96 million people have watched the British 4-episode series that begins with armed police raiding the home of a terrified 13-year-old boy accused of murdering a young girl. And it ends with a raw illustration of the pain of his broken family. So as you can see, the series delves into issues relating to the use of cell phones and social media by teenagers and how it affects their social relations, their self-worth, and even their mental health. The problem is not confined to the UK. Many governments, or at least school boards in different countries, are tackling the issue in schools, mostly in high-income countries where just about every teenager has their own cell phone. To give some quick examples, a report commissioned by the French government recommended that children should not use smartphones until they are 13 years old and should not have access to conventional social media platforms until they are 18. Mobile devices are banned in classrooms in the Netherlands, except for specific educational or medicinal purposes. And as of the 10th of December, that's in a couple of days' time, Australia will ban the use of social media by teenagers under the age of 16 years old at this stage. The details surrounding the laws and exemptions are still in negotiation with the Australian government, but the Australian Academy of Humanities has stated these plans fail to recognize the ample evidence for why such a ban is unworkable, how it will produce severe flow-on complications, and why it will harm rather than help children in their development into adulthood. So as that last statement shows, the jury still seems to be out on exactly how bans or other restrictions should work, noting that many teenagers also rely on their phones and social media to stay in touch with friends, find support groups, etc. But why is it appropriate for IAP to take up this work? Well, some academies have already worked on the issue. The Leopoldina in particular, 2025, they produced the report, Social Media and the Mental Health of Children and Adolescents. There's been work in New Zealand by the Koitu Centre for Informed Futures. It's called Addressing Youth Mental Distress in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's also published October this year. And the WHO Europe office produced a report September 2024, Teens, Screens and Mental Health, which indicates the need for healthier online habits among adolescents. But again, these all focus on high-income countries, but cell phone use and progress towards market saturation is increasing in all economies. What applies today in Korea or Japan, Germany or the USA will likely apply soon in Thailand, Malaysia, South Africa, Brazil, and following on Ethiopia, Ghana, Cambodia, Nicaragua, etc. So this is a wave of complications coming to us all. I therefore see this project rolling out in two parts. One, analyzing the issue by comparing cell phone ownership and social media use by teens between countries, comparing within and across regions, and across levels of economic development, and also considering gender. Boys and girls use social media, cell phones differently. And then there are analyzing actions taken so far. Those are examples given above, but there are also others, I'm sure, that are out there that we could track down. We need to understand what science, if any, was used to develop the recommendations, collating what evidence there is, what works, and what is counterproductive. And such evidence can help guide recommendations for countries considering implementing any restrictive measures. So far, countries seem not to be comparing methods and results, but each one is developing its own ideas. I think this is exactly where IAP can help. For partners and collaborators, of course, interested academies, all are welcome to participate. Those who have suitable experts or who's done previous work related to the issue are particularly welcome. Children's mental health, cell phone uptake, etc. Or those academies in which countries have identified this as a priority, they're beginning to tackle the issue. These countries have it on the political agenda, maybe. So ideally, we would get a group of academies involved that are spanning the scale of GDP. How can IAP best support this? I've just alluded to identifying interested academies and experts. Perhaps one per each regional network could organize a local workshop, a regional workshop to go more into depth in that region. We need to identify sources of funding for travel, the production of reports, the dissemination of reports, and so on. And then identify other opportunities, perhaps with that core group of academies where results can be presented both nationally and internationally.
Thank you, Peter. Any quick questions, reactions? Ian?
Thanks very much. Ian Wiggins from the Royal Society. So question, Peter, on yours, but I guess it applies to quite a lot of them as well, is who would be the audience of that statement and what policy change would we be trying to affect? And I guess what worries me a little bit with that theme, and to an extent the proposals on meat alternatives and also some of the climate issues, is how we strike the balance between demonstrating the evidence to policymakers and looking like we're telling people how they should live their lives, and as a particularly that space with the relationship between parents and their teenagers, and how we kind of calibrate that as science academies and not looking like we're trying to stray too far away from what might be the realms of science advice.
Okay, I think in this particular case, and probably also for the others discussed so far, we're not looking at a statement with recommendations. This would be more an analysis of what is there, what is known, and can we sort of collate that somehow present the evidence as it is and probably steering short or stopping short of recommendations, but please note that, there are benefits, there are potential side effects, unwanted side effects, and so on. And exactly, what evidence there is, what evidence is missing, and where further research is needed. In this particular case, it's that rather than coming out with a sharp statement. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on the same question.
And we will, of course, have a general discussion in a little bit after all the contributors are done with their remarks. Maybe we move on for now to Mark Walport from the Royal Society. The Royal Society has suggested two proposed statements, one on STEM publishing, the second one on solar radiation management. And Mark will talk about those.
Thank you very much indeed, Rania. So the proposal here is to make statements, and I think there is actually a generic issue, which is that I think the IAP should avoid doing enormous duplication of work if there is a vast amount of reports and evidence out there already. So it needs to think very carefully about how it can add value. And in these two areas, the Royal Society thinks that IAP can add value by bringing things together, not trying to duplicate what's already done. So talking about STEM publishing first, this is a very hot topic at the moment. I think everyone would agree that research is not complete until it's been published. And indeed, the reputation of science and STEM subjects in general depends on them being trustworthy. And this is becoming an increasingly difficult issue. So firstly, the volume of research is going up very dramatically around the world. There are many new players. With the increase in volume, there is more and more challenge on peer review. And so everyone is getting overloaded with peer review. And there's very little accountability in the process of peer review. Secondly, there are some perverse incentives for researchers. So there is an enormous drive to publish in journals that have a reputation for being prestigious, although there probably aren't enough of such journals in order to satisfy the high quality of research that is out there. And there is the second perverse incentive, which has already, I think, been discussed at this meeting, which is an incentive to reduce the content of the paper to a single number, rather than go to the trouble of reading it and working out what's actually been discovered and whether it's easy or not. There are all the challenges and opportunities of new technologies, and artificial intelligence in particular, which has the potential for huge benefits, but also risks. And one of the risks is that paper mills are being developed, which are creating completely synthetic papers with fake authors in many cases. Thirdly, there are the whole questions about access to the scientific literature, which is far from even. And one of the opportunities of AI is to help with evidence synthesis. But this is very hard when research is hidden behind access barriers. And of course, there is very interesting innovation, particularly in the area of preprint servers, and there are all sorts of other possibilities for innovation. Why is it important to act now? Well, for all of the above reasons, really. There is dramatic change going on in the world of publishing, and I think that we need collectively to get our act together. In terms of potential global and or regional impact, well, this is a global activity. And it's worth saying also that English is not the only language in which research is published. And so there are challenges for scientists, researchers who are publishing in other languages. And Brazil, for example, China, there are many countries where other languages are used. And so we think that the IAP's regional networks could be very useful here. It's worth saying that there has quite a lot of work gone on reviewing publishing. There's the Rescue Consortium project, which is a roadmap to improve ethics in science and combat predatory publishing, which has been supported by the IAP. The Royal Society itself is doing work, and we will publish a report sometime in the first quarter of next year. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences is doing work. Leopoldina is doing work. And so there is a lot of interest. And I think that the Royal Society would be happy to support the co-development of the proposal as part of the work. So that's the first proposal. Shall I pause there in case there are any questions, or go straight on to the second?
Let's do that because they are two very different
They are very
topics. So any questions of clarification for this part?
No?
Okay. Let's
Okay,
go on.
it's easy. So the second one is on the slightly ambiguously titled topic, I think, of solar radiation modification. I sort of slightly have the vision of us trying to tune the sun, turn down the fusion reactor, which of course is not possible. But the issue, of course, is actually trying to reduce the solar radiation reaching the planet. And this is a highly topical and contentious issue. It's topical because we are failing to reach any of the targets for restricting the effects of climate change at the moment. And it is contentious because it's the second you start putting things into the atmosphere, then you may put them up in one place, they may affect weather and climate in another part of the world. And you can't really constrain atmospheric interventions to particular geographies because there are high velocity winds. And so what happens in one area affects another. There are also different ways proposed of doing it. It's also worth recognizing that this is a temporary mitigating effect, because if you stop the intervention, then of course there is more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It doesn't stop the accumulation of carbon dioxide. But having said that, and there have been lots of reports, again, IPCC, UNEP, 2021 report of the National Academies of Science, and 2023 OSTP report. But nevertheless, there is activity starting to happen on this front. And indeed, Switzerland called for an expert panel on solar radiation modification to be established at the recent United Nations Environmental Assembly in February 24. The resolution didn't pass due to opposition and a lack of formal consensus, but may come back. So again, this is something which is truly global. And again, it's an area where the IAP could be a useful vehicle to bring together academies from different parts of the world to reach a consensus statement, but not try and, as it were, start with an evidence synthesis from scratch, which is an enormous piece of work. So those are the two proposals, and in both cases, the Royal Society has done work, just to be absolutely clear, but would be happy to help lead the development of the consensus statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any quick questions on the second topic, solar radiation management? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So Peter, before I pass the floor to you, should we start getting some ideas from the floor, starting with Leah? And then if anyone else wants to provide a comment, maybe you raise your hand so that I know how to manage time before we go to Q&A. Wherever you prefer. You can come here or do it from the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I would like to tell you a few words about the proposal, which is the kind of a common undertaking of, let's say, European effort led by Royal Irish Academy, a member of ALEA, and hopefully IAP as well. It's and it is it builds on ALEA's, and just mention ALEA is a federation of 61 European academies. It builds on a science education working group, which for more than a decade has functioned as the, let's name it, the European arm of IAP's science educational panel. So that's the initiative that I'm going to tell you about. The project under temporary title is Advancing Science Education in Europe through Interdisciplinary Learning, Literacy and Ethics. And I don't need to convince anybody here in this room that challenges like climate change, public health, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, all of these challenges require citizens who understand sciences, who can think critically, and who can make informed, evidence-based decisions. And yet, across Europe, science education still faces persistent gaps. Many schools struggle to introduce interdisciplinary approaches, to teach digital skills in meaningful ways, to address ethical questions linked to AI or biotechnology, or to help young people navigate misinformation. Learners often don't have enough opportunities to understand how science works, what its limits are, and why it plays such a central role in society. And this is what this project is about. So the project focuses on three major themes. One is interdisciplinary learning. So we want to understand how science can be better connected with technology, engineering, mathematics, and even social issues such as climate justice or the ethics of AI. Then we have scientific literacy and public engagement. So the goal is not just for students to learn facts, but to develop the ability to analyze evidence, detect misinformation, and engage with societal debates. And third, ethics and social responsibility. So very shortly, this project, as mentioned, led by Royal Irish Academy in partnership with ALEA and hopefully IAP, is built around two major components. One is a European-wide survey and a one-day symposium. The survey will gather insight from teachers, researchers, academies, and other stakeholders across Europe. It will help us map existing practices, challenges, and opportunities. And this insight will fit directly into the central event, which will be a day-long international symposium. What else I can just to shortly say, we would produce a comprehensive analysis of the pan-European survey. Of course, the symposium would be a product itself, a detailed project report, and of course, broad dissemination through ALEA, hopefully IAP, and our member academies, mostly the Royal Irish Academy as our member academy. And we would also produce a supplementary policy brief. So what else I can add is our goal is to support policymakers, academies, educators, and let's say entire education system in creating science learning that is interdisciplinary, research informed, digitally confident, ethically aware, and inclusive for all learners. So that's in brief about this project.
Thank you so much. Can you also please introduce yourself in case not everybody knows you here?
Yeah, maybe I will stand because I was reading a bit. I'm Paweł Rawiński. I'm president of the Federation of European Academies, ALEA.
Thank you. Any quick reactions to this? Any other walk-ins, individuals who would like to propose a topic? You don't have to speak for 5 minutes. You can just throw your idea on the floor. Okay, hearing none, Peter will pass on you to moderate the discussion, the general discussion on the presentations we have heard. And if you can please bring Haruka and Bert on the screen so that we are seeing all contributors here. Thank you. Okay.
I want to make a comment on the moderator's suggestion. And I really want to pick up on Ian's point, actually, which the use by adolescents and other young people of social media is a really, really difficult piece of social science, where I think there's potential for huge confounding factors in terms of why are they using social media in the way they do. And I just worry a bit about whether the evidence is anywhere near sufficient and why IAP is uniquely placed to do something. And I think it's another area where we have to accept actually that there are very significant cultural differences across the world. And so what applies to teenagers in one country may actually not apply in exactly the same way in other countries. There are all sorts of issues about how they access the internet, what material is available to them, because in some countries there are very different rules. And so I just think IAP should be very careful as to what it's stepping into with this one, because I think it is just so difficult. And frankly, I fear that the evidence is still far from sufficient for policymakers to make very reliable decisions. And finally, this is actually an area where science meets values, which is really important. Science is just one of the bases on which policymakers make decisions. But when it comes to teenagers and their use of a technology that is ubiquitous and expanding, then personal, political, and all sorts other sorts of values come into play very, very quickly. So just beware, in my opinion.
I can respond as a presenter and not a moderator. Maybe that didn't come through, but I think we're aware of those issues and like the lack of evidence that there is in many, many countries, and how whatever evidence there is used. I think potentially collating that together and presenting not as a fait accompli, but as a let's say a starting point for discussions. What do we need to take into consideration? That there are ways to frame it. I think it's an interesting topic. You say it's very complicated, touches on many social differences in different countries. But if not IAP, I think that the field is right for some organization to come in at a certain point.
But I mean, I'll shut up after this. Evidence in one country may not translate to another country in this field. This is not physics or chemistry.
This is true.
And so one's just got to be careful. You can't extrapolate so easily.
Stephanie, have a roving microphone.
Just taking up that discussion, and this is way beyond my technical expertise, except that I have watched in institutional situations this kind of project becoming very controversial. And sometimes the criticism has been, first of all, if you are going to use this kind or gather this kind of information, under what kind of expertise are you doing that? What about the experts in the world who actually know this? Now, maybe you have a plan to bring in psychologists and people who know all of this kind of field. But the other question that I've encountered many times in these kind of hot topic projects is who gives ethical approval for this kind of work? And would the IAP be looking for some kind of approval of the project plan, or would you be handing it over to other experts? For me, this is it's controversial enough, but I'm not sure that the IAP is the right body to do it, unless we kind of contract it to people who are experts. I say this from my position on the IAP board, concerned about what kind of situation this might bring, because it is such an open and topical subject.
Okay, point taken. And I believe we could address those issues, but it's how we frame them, and tread very carefully. But I don't want to be the focus of this discussion. Happy to carry it on, but if there are other comments on any of the others, please.
Shakila Sangaratnam, Vice President International of Academy of Medical Sciences, UK. Touching base on what Chris talked about, climate health. I think it's particularly important since WHO has clearly said it's the largest, biggest global health emergency we're facing, but less than 1% of funding with the climate initiatives is towards health. And yes, we all know there is a problem, but there is very little known on the metrics by which we are measuring the impact of health, despite us surrounded by health data. Yes, we're drowning in health data. We have data on what's happening, temperature, precipitation every single day, but we haven't really managed to link them up in terms of monitoring. How do we know the measures we are making are helping us? The burden of the problem is a huge bit of a data gap and evidence gap in that space, which the academies are uniquely based on a multi-sectoral approach, not just a health, but also in terms of the heat, into the flooding and all of those things. And the second one is also specific populations. So pregnant women, we know in pregnancy, they are more prone for preterm birth. But again, because of the lack of data, no action is being done. There's a huge potential to look at vulnerable populations, children, migrations, and all of that in that space. And the last one is capacity building. We do need to support our next generation of academics to work in the space, to have the communication, to create and produce the evidence, which is much needed, because we are going, irrespective of what people think on why climate change happens, it's clear-cut the impact of climate change on health. And we do not have the necessary evidence to tackle this. So we will be very supportive. And it's really great with the COP30, you had a good support of the academies. And I think there is a significant role for the academies to come together and work in that space.
Okay, thank you. And I can see the 3 sections that you mapped out there. I wonder if you or Chris could expand on how you would see an IAP project unfolding on that.
Did you want to say that, or would you like me to? That's a good question. I think I hesitate to say it, but I don't know at this point, and I think that that's like actually potentially a good thing. I think something like this, because of the size and scope that Shakira mentioned, that this really is, and she mentioned the WHO, I think you mentioned, but it's not just them. I mean, the World Economic Forum puts out their threat indicators and has identified climate change as the #2 threat in the next 2 years and the #1 threat over the next 10 years. Like, this is something that so many organizations and types of organizations and types of institutions are dealing with, that the convening power of the academies is so critically important, especially for public-private partnerships. And that's where I would start. I would say that this is such a massive issue that really some really thoughtful, long-term, blue sky brainstorming is needed in this area to really bring those true experts in and to think about the work that has been done so that we don't duplicate efforts, and really what the most valuable thing that we can do is. And that's where I think the unmatched convening power of IAP really would be a good first step.
Please. We have people in online, especially including.
You can also look at the expanding role of AI. I was talking to a quantitative computational social scientist from Young Academy in Sweden, who's doing some really amazing work with the satellite imaging and what's happening and linking with health data. So as Chris was saying, there's a lot of unknowns, and bringing the best minds together will be the place to start, especially given the capabilities and what we can do with data. and how we can work in a smart way to find solutions to this wicked problem.
Okay, please, one more. Yeah.
Just a general comment. I am a social scientist. Basically, science and scientists are knowledge providers, which means that they take provider's perspective. You see, whether you use the term learning or stimulus and response, whatever. Basically, learning theory is based on information provider's perspective. But when we think about consumers and people versus the public, we need to think about information consumers' perspective. And so information consumers' perspective, what is the difference between information providers' perspective and information consumers' perspective? Providers' perspective puts science as a first priority. But consumers' perspective puts their own problems as a first, and then relate science to that problem solving. And so science is considered, should be considered a second stage instead of a first stage. As long as we are concerned with science as a first stage, we are failing. Never achieve whatever that knowledge gain or whatever public understanding of science. And so we need to shift perspective. And so IAP also think about that kind of a big gap between perspectives, information providers and the information consumers' perspective. Otherwise, we never understand the public understanding, how it comes about. And so about youth, young people, about the, what is that, the STEM education, or the science literacy or campaign, whatever. You see, without changing that kind of perspective, we are always failing and blaming other people's consumers. We are blaming consumers. So it's just a general comment. Thank you. I am from South Korea. I am elected as one member of the IAP Communication Education as the outreach committee this year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. If I may speak on behalf of IAP, I think it's exactly what we're trying to do in a way. We have the scientists in the room, we have the scientific backgrounds, we can call on as many experts, but we know there are societal challenges. People want answers. People want to be healthy, for example, in the topic we've just been discussing on climate change and health. So how can we, as the scientific community, the academies, provide that information, that advice that the consumers are asking for? We are kind of the brokers in between as the academies and the network of academies. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that point. Gianfranco, or maybe first Ruth, you have the mic.
So I'm going to change the subject. I have a different question to Mark about this STEM document. In what respect this document differs or resonates with other activities like DORA or Quora or Plan S? So what is different? What is new? What is added?
That's a good question. It's completely distinct from Plan S. Plan S is a very specific plan for enabling open access. This is actually a much broader look at the whole landscape of scientific publishing. And The answer is that there are an awful lot of global issues. And I think what IAP could add would be a coherent voice insofar as one is possible, coming from different parts of the world. So I think that as IAP can assemble a really powerful group of stakeholders, and everyone in science actually has a view on science.
What about DORA? Because DORA is also addressing the same kind of problem.
Sorry? Say again?
DORA or QUARA, all these actions, not only Plan S. I mean, the question is, what is different from actions which are already high? For example, this morning we have discussed research assessment with some partners. I mean, so the question is, with respect to actions that are already ongoing.
There are a lot of potential actions that could be taken. For example, one thing which has not been universally recognized yet is that when we interact with our bank, we have to identify ourselves and authenticate ourselves. At the moment, there is no system for identification and authentication of scientific authors that is rigorous. There is, for example, sorry, I've forgotten the acronym. ORCID. But actually that doesn't come with authentication each time it's used, and it doesn't have the rigor that you might expect. So we could deal with paper mills almost overnight if we introduce rigorous identification authentication procedures. There's a string of other things which have not yet been universally accepted. And I think that if you take the collective reports that are out there at the moment, you'll find that, you know, Plan S is a parenthesis in that, actually. There are so many things that can be done. There's the whole question as to whether preprints which are widely accepted in physics and mathematics should extend right across the board. At the moment, there isn't proper access to people who want to synthesize scientific information. So frankly, there is a lot that could be done that does not duplicate existing things. And I think the other thing to say is that DORA and QUARA are observed in the breach, rather they're both, the principles that they both espouse are very good, but they're observed in the breach rather than in reality. And so we need to think about whether there are ways to increase the number of signals that an article is good. There's a lot to do.
Okay. Can I also remind everybody that we do have 2 people tuned in online, Rima and the Alternatives to Meat, and Haruka Sakamoto, about bridging academia and diplomacy, whether there's any comments or thoughts also based on the discussion that we've had that we could put to these 2. If you have the microphone.
I have the microphone on the other side of the room, but I was not going to ask for the online speaker. So now I don't know.
No,
I was
please.
following up.
You have the microphone. Go
Okay,
ahead. Then we'll come
thank
to
you. I'm just following up because I'm program manager for DORA. So since, and thank you for the shout out for our work. I was just going to perhaps bring to the attention of colleagues that we have partnered with the International Science Council that has a forum on integrating scholarly reform assessment, research assessment with scholarly publishing reform. And then we had a meeting in November in Pisa, and we will continue to work with the International Science Council on that. And perhaps we could invite the colleagues in the academies and IAP to join our effort on connecting those 2 reform movements that we hope very much will be more in practice than in principle. Thank you.
Thank you. First here, then we'll come.
Thanks, Peter. Ruth Cooper, Royal Society UK. It's been very interesting to hear the presentation. Thank you, everybody. I'm curious to know, and apologies if I've missed it, what's the process from here on? What's going to happen when? How will these discussions be taken forward, please?
Basically, if I can answer that, we will have further discussions, especially with the IAP board, the advisory committee also, to start prioritizing what is feasible, what is the most appropriate, or all the issues that have been raised here. So we're not ending here in 10 minutes. It's an ongoing discussion, and especially the new board to take up from Thursday onwards. With that, maybe we have a microphone here.
Heba Baroud. I'm a member of the Global Young Academy and a professor of civil engineering at Vanderbilt University in the US. My question is a follow-up to Shakila's comment regarding the resource availability for conducting climate health work. It's quite surprising that less than 1% of climate-related research is dedicated to health. And so to address this topic, because it's interdisciplinary, it's not sitting under one particular agency. And Chris, you rightfully said that we need a convener such as the IAP to bring together people from different disciplines. I'm curious about your thoughts or whether this was mentioned in your discussions around the statement about funding and resource availability, because it seems that, I mean, to some extent, the data is there, there's climate weather data available, the health data is there, but we just need to actually do the work of bringing all of this together. And doing this work requires a lot of resources and funding. And over the last maybe couple of years, there's been some initiatives from NIH, from some of the foundations on climate and health, but there's not really a dedicated funding source for this, unless I'm mistaken. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on this.
Great question. So in short answer, there's not like a true dedicated source, but there are some very large emerging sources that are coming up. I said the good and bad that came out of COP. One thing that you might have all seen is that and I'll blank on the name of the philanthropies or who's included, but 3 major philanthropies got together and devoted almost $1 billion over the next 10 years to fighting this and to devoting their work to it. And if I'm not mistaken, Rockefeller came out last year and said that almost all, if not all, of their work is going to be focused on climate, and they obviously have the health lens that they work through. So it's really all climate health. So there are these really great signals, but we're also seeing, and I don't want to speak too centrically about the U.S., but with the losses of funding that we have seen when we talk to philanthropies around the world, within the U.S., we've seen that over the last year, their submissions are somewhere between 4 and 8x that they are working through right now. And so I think there's going to be some time that's going to need to be given. 2 things. Time that's going to be given for these philanthropies to actually figure out how to work in this new reality, because their systems are completely overwhelmed for that. So trying to be in those conversations as much as we can will be incredibly valuable. And then secondly, we're just going to have to continue to try and get that dedicated source of funding. And that could be something that this group looks into again with either their convening power or their networking, whatever it is, the push for something like that would be incredibly valuable beyond words.
Thank you. I'm conscious that time is running. Okay, Francis, and then I'm going to give the floor to Thomas, Bert, and Haruka. Never remember your name, so just to give some final thoughts, because you haven't had a chance to respond to anything yet.
Francis Saparovich from the Australian Academy of Science, and my question relates to Haruka's topic on diplomacy, and I was wondering whether the younger academies are more concerned about restrictions being put on us by some governments with whom we can collaborate. So there's restrictions. Some governments are putting restriction on which countries certain scientists can collaborate with.
Thank you for your question. Because of some microphone trouble, I cannot clearly hear your questions. But what my understanding is that your question is that any restriction for the participating country or any age restriction are you asking for? Sorry for the clarification.
Can we have the microphone again? So,
yeah.
We have the mic back.
Thank you. I should have phrased it better. So some governments are putting restrictions on scientists on whom, again, I'm getting the phrasing wrong. Some governments are restricting scientists from collaborating with certain countries. That's the phrasing I really wanted. So is there concern from young academies about these restrictions?
Thank you for that question. Yes. So I only know the situation in Japan, and I don't really see it is the huge limitation for the young academy or scientists to join any diplomatic processes. But it would be but my background is in the public health, and then so regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, I think there's a huge debate about scientific diplomacy, about how we can distribute the equitable access for the vaccination, or how we can secure the adequate number of the COVID-19 vaccination. And then this kind of the diplomatic discussion usually is the great collaboration between the scientific academy and then the decision-making process that mainly done by the government. And then I don't really see any huge restriction in Japan, but I said I only know the situation in Japan. And then, but as you mentioned, as you pointed out, if there's any huge issues in other countries, or this is a big challenge in any other countries, I'm happy to hear any other example, and would like to also address this topic in the project as well.
Maybe that's a challenge we can put to the young affiliate members that are here, whether they can get together and discuss that and come up with an answer for us. Thomas, you've been sitting patiently. I know we're here more at 11 o'clock tomorrow. But
yes. So thank you. Yeah, bridging knowledge systems is very, very challenging. And I think it's really, really important that we find ways of learning lessons from attempts that have been done, and that we can actually build on those for the future. And I will invite everyone here to come at 11 tomorrow, because we will continue that discussion on the role of different knowledge systems for a global stewardship of a very important system. So thank you.
I think in this particular case, the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralism begins in January. Is that right?
It begins in January, yeah.
So for IAP to act, we need to act quickly in this case. Thank you. Bert, any last thoughts from your side?
Yes, thank you, Peter. I mean, essentially, the science in terms of the life cycle assessments of these products is fairly clear. What of course becomes a major question is to what extent are these products acceptable in other parts of the world? And that is obviously a question of consumer behavior, but also of economic and cultural differences that exist across the world. So in a sense, what I'm suggesting, this is a relatively simple topic. We're on a train that is accelerating into the buffers, in the sense that the amount of deforestation that would result from a situation where we are continuing to rely entirely on livestock production, then we are in real difficulties across the world. And so to an extent, it is a relatively simple product, but it is also a project that is focusing very much on social sciences and the cultural acceptability of some of the products, as well as the possibility to actually convince people to eat less of livestock, to eat fewer livestock-related products. So I think it's an interesting question as to how you convince people without, as we were confronted with the idea: do you want to make everyone vegetarians? Definitely not. We are wanting to make sure that people are understanding that the lifestyle choices that they make have some consequences. And to an extent, I think that's why the project is focusing on social science aspects of the problematics that has arisen.
Okay, thank you, Bert. And maybe I'll give the microphone for a last 1 minute elevator pitch from Haruka, if you have anything to add to wrap up with.
Oh, thank you very much for giving me the floor again. And I actually do not have any specific point I would like to add, but thank you very much for inviting me tonight again. And then not only just showing my proposal, but I also really enjoy the discussion that this session. So thank you very much.
Okay, also thank you. I think that let us conclude. This would have been a perfect time for Ruth to have asked her question, but we've already answered that. We also take on board the discussions, the comments we'll discuss with the IAP board, even during these days, but as we go into the new year as well. Thank you all for your contributions, for a nice, vibrant session. And please help me in thanking our presenters.